It's January 15, 2026. Federal prosecutors in Philadelphia just dropped a bombshell. 26 people charged in a massive international conspiracy to fix basketball games. 39 players from 17 NCAA Division I schools all the way to the Chinese Basketball Association allegedly took bribes to shave points and rig the spread. At least 29 American college games between 2023 and 2025 were compromised. But here's what makes it worse. This isn't new. Flashback to 2007. iPhones were brand new, Netflix was just starting to stream, and Rihanna's Umbrella was playing everywhere. That same year, an NBA referee named Tim Donaghy shocked the sports world by admitting he'd been betting on games he was officiating and actively rigging their outcomes with direct ties to organized crime. From rigged whistles and sold-out arenas to today's sophisticated player point-shaving rings, basketball's integrity remains under siege. Welcome to Follow the Lies, Fraud and Deceit Uncovered. I'm Kevin Barrows. I'm a former FBI special agent and lead case agent on two of the largest white-collar investigations in U.S. history. Today, I'm a partner at Renaissance Associates, where I oversee complex fraud and misconduct investigations. I also co-hosted the Smithsonian Channel docuseries, Sports Detectives, where we track down missing pieces of sports history and expose forgery in the memorabilia world. Right after the Tim Donaghy scandal exploded in 2007, I was brought in by one of the major professional sports leagues to help strengthen their integrity measures. As a former FBI agent who had spent years investigating organized crime and public corruption, my role involved reviewing officiating protocols, spotting red flag patterns in player and referee behavior, and building connections with domestic and international gambling regulators. Back then, sophisticated real-time monitoring barely existed. The leagues had some established relationships with gambling authorities in Las Vegas, but very little communication with overseas betting markets, even though an enormous amount of wagering on U.S. games happened abroad. That was a dangerous blind spot. I worked directly on securing agreements so international regulators would actually share information and investigate suspicious activity. The Donaghy case was the first major game-fixing scandal in the United States since the 1919 Black Sox, and being brought in during the middle of that firestorm left a lasting impression on me. It showed me how fragile trust in sports really is, and how quickly deception can creep into the games we love when money, pressure, and opportunity collide. That experience is exactly why this episode feels especially personal. Let's start at the beginning, with the referee who shook the NBA and all of professional sports to its core. Between 2003 and 2007, NBA referee Tim Donaghy turned his whistle into an illegal money-making machine. For those who aren't deep into sports betting, here's how it works. Every NBA game has a point spread, the predicted margin of victory set by bookmakers. If you bet the favorite, they have to win by more than that number for you to cash your ticket. If you bet the underdog, they can lose by less than that number or win outright, and you still win. Donaghy didn't usually try to fix the final score outright. Instead, he played a much sneakier and more insidious game called point shaving. His manipulation was surgical. A well-timed foul here, a missed traveling violation there, or a questionable out-of-bounds decision could shift the final margin by just enough points to cash the bet. He developed a personal system for working games, swallowing his whistle on obvious foul calls, then balancing it out later in the fourth quarter so everything looked completely normal. To the millions watching on television, it was just another intense NBA game. Only sharp bettors watching the lines could see that something was off. What made his scheme so difficult to detect in real time was how he blended in with the normal chaos of the game. Referees make hundreds of judgment calls per night. Donaghy simply made sure a few of them went the way he needed. He later admitted that he sometimes felt a rush of power, knowing he could influence the outcome while wearing the same uniform as honest officials. This psychological edge, combined with his deep knowledge of NBA tendencies and non-public information, gave him an almost undetectable advantage. As early as 2003, Donaghy began placing bets on games he was officiating. By December 2006, he was receiving cash payments from co-conspirators in exchange for his picks. He even had a code worked out with James Batista, a longtime friend from his parochial high school days in Pennsylvania. Donaghy would use specific phrases over the phone to signal which side he liked. He got paid thousands of dollars for every correct pick, but nothing if he was wrong. He passed his insider picks to gamblers, including people connected to the Gambino crime family, and pocketed anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 per correct tip. Over 200 games were potentially compromised. Donaghy later admitted in interviews that he rationalized his actions by telling himself the games were already full of gray areas and minor mistakes. He was simply nudging outcomes that were already close. In his mind, he wasn't destroying the sport. He was just taking advantage of a system that paid him well but didn't watch him closely enough. What he didn't fully admit, at least not publicly, was the thrill he felt wielding that kind of secret power. As a referee, he controlled the rhythm and outcome of games watched by millions. For a man deep in gambling debt, that sense of control became intoxicating. He was no longer just enforcing the rules, he was writing them in real time. Living that double life, however, came with immense stress. He had to maintain the image of an impartial official while carrying the weight of large bets and the constant fear of being caught. Some nights he would officiate a nationally televised game knowing tens of thousands of dollars were riding on subtle calls only he understood. The psychological toll was enormous, yet he continued for years, convinced he was too smart to get caught. Working behind the scenes were his co-conspirators, Batista and Thomas Martino, who handled the actual betting and moved the money. It was a textbook conspiracy. Wire fraud, abuse of trust, and organized crime, all hidden behind the faith that fans place in officials wearing the stripes. When the scandal finally broke in 2007, it rocked the NBA and the entire sports world. Donaghy eventually pleaded guilty and cooperated with authorities. For a while, it looked like the problem was a one-off. Leagues installed tighter scrutiny and sophisticated real-time gambling analysis. Many believed it couldn't happen again. But fast forward almost 20 years. Legalized sports betting exploded across America. What used to be limited to Vegas and back-alley bookies was now available in everyone's pocket through apps on their phones. And with that explosion, the old vulnerabilities didn't disappear. They multiplied. This time, the fixers didn't target referees. They went straight for the players. In January 2026, federal prosecutors in Philadelphia charged 26 people in the ring. The fixers had recruited players from 17 NCAA Division I teams, offering bribes ranging from $10,000 to $30,000 per game, often more money than many of these young athletes were earning through nil deals. For those who aren't familiar with nil, it stands for name, image, and likeness. Starting in 2021, college athletes were finally allowed to earn money from their personal brand through sponsorships and endorsements. For the first time, many young players had real money in their pockets while still in school. That combination, legalized sports betting available in everyone's pocket plus sudden access to cash, made college athletes far more attractive and far more vulnerable than ever before. The scheme allegedly fixed or attempted to fix at least 29 games. The operation was highly organized. Fixers used a tiered recruitment system, starting with spotters who identified financially motivated or struggling players, then moving to handlers who made the actual offers. They avoided direct phone calls when possible, preferring encrypted messaging apps and video calls where they could show stacks of cash or luxury items in real time as motivation. The mechanics of the fraud had already been tested and refined in the Chinese Basketball Association before being brought to American college basketball. The Donaghy case broke open in 2007, when the FBI began picking up unusual wiretaps and financial trails that linked an NBA referee to known gamblers and organized crime figures. At first, it seemed almost unbelievable. A referee actively betting on games he was officiating. But the evidence kept piling up fast. Phone records, betting slips, bank transactions, and travel logs painted a damning picture. Donaghy was participating in an illegal sports betting ring in which he received cash payments for making winning picks on NBA games, including games he himself was officiating. He relied on information that only a referee would have: knowledge of player injuries, officiating crew dynamics, tensions on the court, and how certain referees called games against specific teams. Donaghy eventually realized the walls were closing in. He flipped and cooperated with authorities, revealing exactly how he had been signaling his picks, using coded language and subtle patterns only someone on the court could control. One of the toughest challenges was proving that Donaghy's calls actually affected the outcomes of the games. The FBI had to watch hundreds of hours of game tape, comparing his officiating patterns to betting line movements on the exact games he worked. They discovered he was remarkably accurate. In the 2006-2007 season alone, he correctly picked the winner or the spread in over 70% of the games he bet on. What complicated the case even further was the culture inside the NBA at the time. Referees had enormous power and almost no real-time oversight. The league had no centralized system to flag unusual betting patterns on games involving specific officials. To outsiders, including the FBI at first, everything looked like normal refereeing. The FBI also had to deal with the delicate politics of the situation. The NBA was a billion-dollar entertainment empire. Bringing down one of its own referees risked massive public backlash and a loss of confidence in the league. Agents had to walk a tightrope, gathering ironclad evidence while keeping the investigation secret from both Donaghy and the league executives until they were ready to move. The investigation also uncovered how deeply Donaghy's gambling addiction had taken hold. Court documents revealed he was hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt to bookies and was desperate to win big to cover his losses. This made him an easy target for organized crime figures who knew exactly how to exploit someone in his position. Investigators had to be extremely careful with surveillance. They couldn't risk tipping off Donaghy or the league. At one point, they even had to coordinate with NBA security without revealing the full scope of the case. The pressure was immense because any leak could have caused a crisis of confidence in professional basketball across the country. Many things can go wrong in that process, but in this case, it worked to perfection. The recent point-shaving scandal started differently. This time, it wasn't a referee. It was the players themselves. It began when betting surveillance firms noticed highly unusual line movements and strange player performances. Guys who were normally reliable were suddenly missing wide-open shots, committing uncharacteristic fouls, or playing well below their averages in games with heavy wagering action. The patterns were too consistent to ignore. Federal investigators stepped in and launched a full-scale probe using modern tools, wiretaps on phones and betting apps, detailed financial tracking to follow the bribe money, analysis of text messages, social media, direct messages, FaceTime calls, and travel records. Eventually, several insiders flipped and cooperated. Donaghy served 15 months in federal prison. The NBA and other leagues tightened their monitoring systems and introduced more sophisticated gambling surveillance, but the damage to fan trust was deep and lasting. For years afterward, every questionable call, every close game, left fans wondering in the back of their minds, was this one really on the level? The 2026 scandal hit even harder. As of now, more than 20 players and several fixers face serious federal charges, including bribery, wire fraud, and conspiracy. The investigation is still ongoing, and more names could surface at any time. What makes this case especially disturbing is that the targets were young college athletes, many of them still teenagers or in their early 20s, who were offered bribes that often exceeded what they were earning through nil deals. Some players reportedly received cash payments in hotel rooms near campus or in parking lots right after the games. Others were sent photos of stacks of cash via text message or given luxury items and vague promises of future help with agents and endorsements. In at least one documented case, a fixer allegedly used threats against a player's family members to ensure compliance. And there was also a chilling international component. It reportedly began in the Chinese Basketball Association in 2022-2023, where fixers first tested and refined their methods on professional players before expanding aggressively into American college basketball. Federal prosecutors described it as a transnational criminal scheme that treated young athletes as interchangeable parts in a betting operation. The scandal exposed serious vulnerabilities in the nil era and has prompted urgent conversations among college administrators, coaches, and nil collectives, which are the organizations that pool funds to create paid opportunities for college athletes, about better financial education and safeguards for young athletes who suddenly have access to large sums of money. These two scandals, nearly 20 years apart, show how quickly integrity can erode when big money meets vulnerable insiders. In Donaghy's era, the corruption came from the officials wearing the stripes. In 2026, it came from the players themselves, the very athletes fans cheer for night after night. The human impact went far beyond the court. Fans who had cheered for these players or trusted the officials suddenly felt betrayed. Parents who had brought their kids to games began questioning whether what they were watching was real. Sports betting companies themselves started losing confidence in the product they were selling. The scandals forced leagues to invest millions more in integrity programs, but many insiders privately admit that no amount of technology can fully prevent someone who is determined to cheat. In the end, these scandals remind us that the real danger isn't just the money that changes hands in the shadows. It's the slow erosion of something far more valuable. The belief that when we watch a game, what we're seeing is real. Each episode, I'll share a lie detector tip, a practical, field-tested way to help you spot deception or protect yourself from situations where deception becomes much more likely. Today's lie detector tip is about the dangers of gambling, especially when it mixes with sports. We've seen the catastrophic consequences in these scandals. Even small compromises can destroy careers, reputations, and the trust millions of fans place in the game. I once received a call from a professional athlete whose family member was being extorted by a bookie he owed a large sum of money. The bookie was threatening to expose the relative and smear the athlete's name. I was able to help defuse the situation using consensual recordings and law enforcement, but not everyone is so fortunate. The damage isn't limited to athletes. The consequences for regular people, especially families, can be just as devastating. Gambling addiction doesn't usually announce itself with flashing lights. It often starts small, just a friendly bet with friends, and quietly grows into something that clouds judgment and creates crushing pressure as debt skyrockets. Whether you're a player, a referee, a coach, or a fan betting heavily, watch for these red flags. Sudden financial stress, secrecy around money or betting apps, chasing losses, borrowing money or rationalizing bigger and bigger bets. Once someone owes money or desperately needs a win, they become extremely vulnerable to manipulation. Parents, this one is especially important. Underage gambling has become a serious societal problem. Kids often access popular sports betting apps like DraftKings and FanDuel using adult credentials. And the rise of prediction markets like Kalshi and Polymarket have made it even easier for teenagers to get pulled in. My advice for parents, take it seriously. Talk openly with your kids about the risks. Set strict limits early and monitor for warning signs. Pay extra attention if your son or daughter seems suddenly overly focused on specific games, gets unusually upset after certain outcomes, or starts hiding their phones or spending habits. Keep a close eye on their access to money. If you see red flags, don't wait. Reach out to a counselor, a teacher, a coach, or a gambling helpline right away. I recently worked with a parent whose 17-year-old son secretly racked up $100,000 in debt on a shady offshore gambling site and then used the parents' credit cards to cover it. That kind of nightmare can happen faster than most people realize. I'll share more practical tips like this in future episodes. From Tim Donaghy's rigged whistles to today's widespread point-shaving scandals, the lies in basketball keep evolving, but so do the ways we uncover them. Has sports betting, game fixing, or any kind of sports fraud ever touched your world or someone you know? I'd genuinely like to hear about it. Send your story to Kevin at followtheliespodcast.com. It might even become a future episode. If you want episode recaps, key takeaways, and extra lie detector tips delivered to your inbox, subscribe to my free newsletter on Substack at followthelies.substack.com. And if you want to sharpen your ability to spot deception, whether it involves gambling, business deals, or everyday conversations, I put together a free guide called 7 Proven Strategies to Spot Lies and Uncover the Truth in Any Interview. It's short, practical, and based on techniques I've used for years in real investigations. You can grab it right now at followthelispodcast.com. If you're enjoying the show, hit subscribe, leave a rating and review, and tap the bell so you never miss an episode. Thanks for listening. Until next time, follow the lies.